Hit the record. So, welcome back, everybody. This is IGtv, production of New York City Metro InfraGard, and we're back with Valene Skerpac, and she's kind of getting into the biometrics area here, where she's got a slide up on the screen right now for biometric authentication value as a multi-factor option. Valene, before I ask you to continue in that area, we do have somebody else up on the chat, which also wants us to just touch a little bit upon behavioral versus physical biometrics as you go forward with this. So I just wanted to let you know, there are some people that are coming onto the chat with various things they'd like to hear about.
Yeah.
All right. So why don't you take off without me using up all the time here? Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get to that in a minute. But I think the value to our organizations that we're seeing pop up is the fact that as a biometric, unlike the other options, it can't be shared. And this is very important with, for example, now HIPAA, et cetera, other requirements coming upon us from a compliance standpoint. I can't, for example, access my daughter's medical records. And it also has been, for a number of years, long time now, a legal signature, which lets us automate and have some bottom line impact within our applications. It is quite convenient if you try to develop an app that you can't share the credentials, very complicated, easy to do with a biometric, swipe of a finger, etc. And then if, depending on your application, it can automate these personalization features if that's important to your application, which some it is. So what I like to do is all these questions that you have sort of fit within this authenticated model that I put together for building a successful authentication solution. There's this whole landscape of authentication options and how do these products work together, which biometrics are working with which things, how do they integrate with our apps, how do our apps integrate with each other, the various use cases that we talked about. And specifically, are we talking about a large set of users? Who are the actors involved? Well, this becomes very important because to use the authentication properly, we really have to have these things designed properly. What's our normal flow? How do we handle exceptions? Do we need alternative flows? Now, how does this translate into specific requirements? We talked about performance. We talked about the risk assessment with technology-wise, business-wise of a biometric being compromised. We do our we use that, our risk assessment procedures throughout. So I just want to make sure that when we're doing our series, we know where it fits in, so we're not taking things out of context.
Well, I guess if I can interrupt you at that point, I guess doing your risk assessment it becomes very, very important here, right? So that, if you're doing the right risk assessment, then you can almost get into that piece of, what if the biometrics are broken, and I guess you have to rescan the iris, and then you have to double down perhaps on the authentication or the multi-factor authentication, which lets you get into that scan.
Exactly, yeah, and really biometrics has its unique properties, and we will want to deal with how we handle those exceptions. But I will say also, remember that it's within our authentication landscape, because there is no silver bullet. We have to figure this out for all of our authentication solutions.
Okay. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, that's all I had for as far as the slides that I.
All right. So we just lost Valene shortly there, and she's back up on the program now. We got you back.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. There you go. Your video's back on.
Am I there? Great.
Yeah, gotcha. All right. So
well, what I wanted to do was set up the series so that we knew everything fit in. We could start talking about some of the questions that that's a good way to go. And then we could, cover some of those things in more detail. I think some of those main questions that we often get: what if the biometric's stolen? What happens if I can't use my biometric? All of those have to fit into how we've crafted our solution, and are common questions that we could talk about how people normally deal with those types of things.
Yeah, I think that's important, Valene. There are, obviously there are legitimate issues all over the place with this, right? And there's going to be those people that come into biometrics that will be critical of it, all right? And as the net doctor is coming, these guys are getting active with me on the chat here. They're saying, well, biometrics is like a password. You can never change. Well, actually, biometrics is unlike a password. All right, the biometrics is tough to change. Passwords you can change. So I think like anything else, it loops right back to the discussion we had with Bill right before this. All right, protect the data. All right, and how you protect the data to make sure that it doesn't get compromised.
Yeah. Well, I just kind of let the cat out of the bag as far as some of the more static biometrics that are not behavioral based. Those I think are probably the greatest worry in that regard. So there has been a series of standards along the way and R&D as far as and we can talk about this in another session in more detail, but basically it essentially, you have a scenarios and standards set up so that there are aliases for the biometric itself.
Okay.
So I think it's important to start really talking about this, because there has been a lot of progress made as far as trying to find solutions.
Okay, so do you want to get into the setup for the series, or how do you want to go forward?
Yeah, well, I do want to talk about the technologies as one of the pieces, just to address a lot of the questions. Just take the main biometric technologies and kind of talk about them. I think that's of interest to everybody. Big difference between, as we talked about, a behavioral biometric, for example, your voice actually changes a lot, so you don't have as much of an issue of the biometric being stolen, because you can use a lot of behavioral schemes on top of the biometric to ensure it's unique each time.
Right.
Which is different than a static biometric, but each has their sort of strengths and weaknesses. Each has their own set of vulnerabilities. That's why they, as I mentioned, they don't stand on their own, but they definitely have a useful place.
Okay. I mean, there's going to be a ton of different areas to explore.
Yeah. The other thing I would like to say is, sure, what are the threats, to the biometrics? I think that's important that we all know that, and that's an interesting area. And then all the good sort of solutions and how they're being used is, on the plus side, is really important.
Yeah, I think on the application side of the house, biometrics are being used all over the place. So I think you're absolutely right about that. And they're used in a number of different capacities within law enforcement as well. All right, we're getting just a little bit long on the segment and time here.
Right.
But did you want to close this out for now, or what do how do you want to end it for today?
Well, I'll just say that I'm very excited about talking about biometrics in general. And I think it is becoming, as we said, more and more relevant. And I'm just excited about putting out a series, and look forward to it.
Okay. That sounds okay. Let's see. I'm trying to manage the thing here. Apparently, Phil beat me to the punch here on the chat line. All right. So, Valene Skerpac, biometrics. We will see you next month. And obviously, if you get up on the chat later on, you can kind of see what's going on. And if you want to put some comments in there, you can do so.
Will do.
Thank you again, Valene.
Very good.
All right. Bye now.
Bye now.